Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to give you some simple anatomy study tips that can help you pass this course and increase your grade. So let's get to it. Tip number 1, master the first few chapters. And you'll want to do this for a few reasons. First, anatomy builds on itself. So it's really important that you learn those foundational concepts that will be covered in the first few chapters, such as the anatomical position and directional terms. You're going to see those used over and over in your anatomy course. For example, just take the bones of your fingers and toes. They're going to be named distal, middle, and proximal. And if you know your directional terms, you'll never get those confused on an exam. Also, it can be a huge help to learn common prefixes and suffixes that you will see in not only anatomy, but the medical field in general. In addition, those basic regional terms and the body planes can also be helpful. The second reason you want to master those first few chapters in anatomy is because you don't always know what's going to be covered on that first exam because you don't know the professor or what the professor is looking for. So if you absolutely master as much as you can in those first few chapters, it's going to help you, and then once you take that exam, you'll score as high as you can. Then you'll be able to refine your study techniques for the next exam because you'll know whether the questions pulled mostly from PowerPoint notes or from the textbook or from the lecture notes or however the class is set up. And then the third reason you want to master those first few chapters in anatomy is that most undergraduate anatomy courses are going to have a comprehensive final. And what that means is it's going to cover all those other chapters you learn throughout the semester. So if you start off really strong in anatomy, then you're going to build your scores up and you're going to have a little bit more wiggle room when you get to the end of the semester when you're a little bit more burned out and you have all these other finals you have to study for in your other courses. Tip number 2, use online videos when you're tired of reading the textbook. And some students overlook this tool when studying, but whenever you begin to read your anatomy textbooks, it can be very encyclopedic and it can cover a lot of material, and that can get overwhelming very quickly. But whenever you find yourself getting mentally fatigued, if you'll just take a break, but then come back, flip through the chapter and find something that you're having trouble with. Maybe it's the bones of the hand or the skin or whatever you're studying. Try to find some YouTube videos on that topic and then sit back and watch that, because that's going to be a different learning dynamic and it's not going to exhaust you as much as just reading through the textbook. And then you can jot notes down while you watch the video and then maybe go back and compare it with what your textbook says. And that way it's going to give you a different format for studying when you get fatigued, but it keeps you studying and keeps you learning so that it's going to help you increase your knowledge for the exam. Tip number 3, use mnemonics as much as possible. And some things that you'll learn in anatomy will be relatively easy to remember, like definitions or basic concepts. And when you're studying that, you can use rote memorization, which is where you repeat it to yourself over and over again out loud, or maybe even write out the definition a couple of times, and that will generally help it stick. But whenever it comes to something like the bones of the hand or the bones of the body or the muscles of the body, it can be really helpful if you think of some mnemonics or even a little song or jingle to help you out. That's why in all my videos, for example, the bones of the hand, I always try to give you some kind of little memory trick or mnemonic, and that can really make the biggest difference as you study anatomy. Tip number 4, break down the meanings of words. For example, one of the 9 abdominal regions is the hypochondriac region. The prefix hypo means below, and chondriac refers to the cartilage of the ribs. So when you put it together, you'll remember that the hypochondriac region is the abdominal region right below that rib cartilage. And breaking down the words of things in anatomy can usually help you because there usually is a method to the madness. A lot of bone structures or muscles will be named after its location or its action or its shape or something like that. So if you can kind of break that down, that can help it stick in your brain. Tip number 5, practice quizzes online. And this gets back to the point I was making earlier about how you can get so tired of reading your textbook and you don't want to study anymore, but if you'll just switch gears and maybe go watch a video about it, and so you're still learning, but it's not as tiring as just sitting and reading a book all day. And that's what free quizzes can help you do as well. Whenever you watch a video, if you'll take a free quiz, that helps cement that information in your mind, and you're still learning, you're still engaging with the information, it's going to help you remember it. And sometimes textbook manufacturers will also have available a study guide, and some of those will have practice test questions, or they might even have like an online test bank. And if you're really worried about passing anatomy, you might want to invest in one of those study guides. Tip number 6, redraw diagrams. And your anatomy textbooks are going to be filled with different diagrams of the skin or different bone structures and so forth. And so what I found helpful would be to take a sheet of paper out sometimes and just trace over the bone really quickly, or get online and print out a bone and then just try to draw lines out and name the structures of it. And by practicing that over and over, it would help me learn the material. Tip number 7, apply the Feynman technique to your anatomy studies. Richard Feynman was a physicist who developed a little method to help him learn material. And you can actually adapt this method to any course, but here's how you could do it for anatomy and physiology. First, read and study a particular chapter, and then when you're done, flip to the chapter summary. Write down some of the main concepts covered in the chapter summary and leave yourself some blanks so you can explain what you've learned. Then try to write out an explanation for each major concept. Pretend as if you're teaching someone else as you do it, and say it aloud and write it down. Then, whenever you find that you struggle to explain one of the concepts, make a little check mark beside that, and then go back and study up on that, or maybe do a few practice quizzes or diagrams, or watch a YouTube video, and then come back and try to explain that concept again. Then when you're done, you can review all the explanations and concepts you drew out, and you can try to simplify it even more or go through it again if you want. Now, I just want to say a couple of things before I wrap up this video. And the first thing is, a lot of people will get really stressed out about anatomy and physiology, especially at the college level. But here's the cool thing about anatomy. You're learning about your body and the structures and how it works. And this actually has application to real life stuff. And especially if you're going to major in a healthcare career, you're going to be using some of this stuff on the job. It's not like when you're in high school and you had to learn like trigonometry or calculus and you're like, I'm never going to use this again. And the second thing I want to say is that I think a lot of students, whenever they look at the vast amount of information covered in a typical anatomy class, they will get really overwhelmed right off the bat, and they'll think to themselves, how in the world am I ever going to remember this information or learn this information? And if I do become a nurse or doctor or whatever you're going to school for, how am I ever going to remember this day in and day out? And the truth is, a lot of nurses and doctors, they don't remember a lot of stuff from anatomy class. If you went to your typical nurse and asked them about the names of the bones in the hand or in the foot, or maybe where this muscle attaches or something like that, the average nurse or doctor probably is going to forget that unless it's a part of their day-to-day specialty. So you're just trying to learn the basics of the human body, how it's structured, and it's great if you can remember it all, but if you can't, don't get too stressed out, because you're going to specialize and you're going to learn what you need to know to do your job once you get on the job and they train you. Alright, so that wraps up this video on anatomy study tips. We have a whole playlist here on YouTube of lectures we've created where we've synthesized information, try to create mnemonics in an attempt to help you pass your anatomy classes, and of course we have free quizzes that go along with that on our website. So thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe.